Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, where we'll be taking you through some of the 5 main reasons it's important to be proactive in AP and what the benefits can be for your team and for your organisation if you are. We'll be hearing from Sarah Cliffe, the Procure-to-Pay manager of M&S, and she'll talk you through their journey around an automated supplier statement reconciliation journey. So as I said, today we'll be hearing from Sarah Cliffe, and she's the M&S Procure-to-Pay manager. Sarah is an experienced finance professional specialising in P2P and O2C end-to-end transitions, operational management and process re-engineering. She's got a proven track record of leading and developing large teams in several blue-chip companies, including Premier Foods and AstraZeneca. And as most of you on the call today know, I'm Ellen Leith, the Director of PPM. We'll also be hearing from Dan Kimpton from statementmatching.com, who'll be showing you how their solution can help overcome some of the issues we'll be looking at today. The session is interactive, and you do have the opportunity to ask questions as we go along, and you can add those into the free text box in your GoToWebinar panel, and that's just over on the right-hand side of your screen. So if you type these in as they occur to you, I can ask Sarah or Dan to address the questions at the end. So with that, I'd like to hand you over to Sarah Cliffe of Marks & Spencer.
Hi, good morning, everybody. Sarah Cliffe, and we have just recently implemented a statement matching solution. I'll take you through the M&S story. Firstly, a little bit of an overview of M&S. So our group revenue is 10.7 billion. And our turnover is actually split, 61% food, 39% clothing and home, of which the clothing and home revenue is 3.7 billion and the food revenue is 5.9 billion. We have just over 1,000 stores, and we have nearly 81,000 employees across the group. So more about the Business Service Centre that is based in the centre of Manchester. It actually opened in 2003, and the scope of the service centre is the end-to-end procure-to-pay, of which I head up that team. We have a sales-to-cash team that includes all the cash from the stores, cash into the business. We have an R2R team that is general accounting, fixed assets, includes property accounting, intercompany, inventory, and we also have a treasury back office as well. We also have a business-to-business team, and the business-to-business team are primarily focused on our trading packs, our weekly, daily standard reporting across the business. Currently, there are 130 full-time employees in the Business Service Centre, and basically we are transacting, protecting and driving performance. We deliver effective transactions and data management and process excellence. So really that is the remit of the service centre. So a little bit more about the procure-to-pay operation within M&S. We process either electronically or via OCR format. They're the 2 formats of invoices that we receive. Just over 4 million invoices a year. All the clothing and home, they're in an EDI format. And our goods not for resale, our GNFR invoices, we have OCR. We have an OCR solution to manage those invoices. We have just over 8,000 active vendors across the group, and we use SAP version 4.6. Currently, we're just investigating the implementation of SAP HANA. Within the P2P team, we have 38 employees, and the team is split into 4 sub-teams, of which we have an invoice processing team. We have a vendor management team that manages the EDI solutions, manages the GRIR, the vendor statement reconciliation process, and we also have a vendor support and a compliance team, of which this team is the first point of contact for anybody internally or any of our vendors do they need any support. This team also go out and do training within the business, primarily on the GNFR process. We also have a payments and an analytics team, So the payments team, obviously, they make all our supplier payments, which also includes all our expenses payments, and they do a lot of the analytics on our standard reporting and our KPIs, and also reporting anything that we need to report externally outside of M&S. So the purchase to pay challenge. So in most organisations, the AP process is largely reactive because being sat at the back end of the process, and the focus is getting our invoices into a system and paid on time. We also deal with high volumes of supplier queries, and we have to be very, very mindful of any duplicate invoices, and we do have quite a robust, albeit it is not the most up-to-date technology that helps us identify duplicate invoices prior to any payments. And obviously we're also chasing the business and making that the business users not only do their part properly, but also they understand the end-to-end process. We also have a build-up of our GRI balances, and really that is where the P2P team can add value. Also, what we're trying to do is be more proactive, and this will really help M&S improve KPIs, not only internal ones, but more importantly, our external KPIs. As one of the key KPIs is that we're signed up to now is the new legislation, where we have to report externally on our payment performance across the business. So this leads me on to supplier statements. So I've been at M&S for just about 17 months now, and historically M&S have not completed supplier statement reconciliations as a routine day-to-day business process. What's happened historically is that they were just prepared at the financial year end to satisfy external audit requirements. So the auditors would take a sample, and the AP team would just provide reconciliations based on that sample. And we actually identified a need quite early on to introduce a standard business process that really helped reconcile our statements proactively. So that's the project, albeit an internal project. So it was all done internally within M&S with the support of IT. We didn't use consultants. So by us implementing a business process that reconciles our vendor statements on a daily basis, it's actually had an improvement on our payment on time performance. It's reduced the number of supplier queries that we've received via our vendor support desk, and it's actually helped us improve our accruals on our cash flow forecasting. So what we've done as a side project to this, we've been working very, very closely with our colleagues in food finance and clothing and home finance to try and get a bit more of a visibility on our cash flow forecasting, and to try and do quite robust forecasts and understand why we've not reached our forecast, and the actual improvement of the smoothing of the GR&I and the statements has actually really added value into that. What it's also done, it's also improved and validated our trade payables balance at the end of the period as well. And we've also been able to release aged GRIR balances based on a statement rec rather than just on an aged at a certain date, which historically M&S have done previously. So why reconcile supplier statements? So basically it's what we have found is that we identified very, very early on missing invoices, but more importantly, missing credit notes, because we actually found that as a business, we weren't receiving credit notes that we were entitled to. So that has in effect driven a massive improvement in credit notes coming through on an ongoing basis. We've also identified missed postings, so invoices that we have on our ledger but are not even owed to the vendor, and where we've done manual adjustments for debits and credits that have been processed the wrong way around. It's actually helped us support our duplicate risk So looking at invoice numbers, dates and amounts. So it's done an element of it's helped support a little bit of a validation for us, and it's also helped support the duplicate invoice process check that we have on an ongoing basis. What we've also identified is where we've got vendors that have either not followed the M&S process or taken advantage of an M&S process and caused some issues with some of the high volumes of errors, and we've been able to fix this at the beginning of the process prior to invoices coming into AP, and working very closely with those vendors. So the benefits of our proactive reconciliation. So it's identified discrepancies before they become issues. It's helped us resolve errors that in effect have cost M&S money. It's ensured all the credits are applied, reduced our supplier queries, and ensure accuracy of our trade payables balances, that ultimately has enabled to support the release of the GRIR balances, which we do on a weekly basis. So we manage our GRIR balances very, very closely. So going back to the setup of the little project that we embarked on internally. So the scope was all our active vendors, which was the 8 million, and therefore the 4 million invoices that go through the trade payables ledger annually. We needed to implement an automated supplier statement reconciliation process with no increase in headcount. So we were looking to in effect shift the work to be a little bit more value added. The solution had to take the M&S supplier statements, match at line level data, which can be quite complex, and all that data that we held in our SAP solution. The solution also needed to accept paper, PDF and Excel statements. We wanted to make it as easy as we could for a vendor to send in details of our account. So we did insist that we needed, more than one option. And also we wanted an option where vendors could upload their own statements. So anything that we look at the moment in Marks & Spencer is that we're trying to make it as self-service as we can. And we also wanted the onboarding process to be simple, and we actually decided that we were going to take the big bang approach. So rather than just do tranche after tranche after tranche, we just decided we're just going to use a big bang, and we're going to focus on our GNFR suppliers, and then we'll do then with the food, and then with the clothing and home. But it had to be a big bang across all the sectors. The partner that we were going to be choosing had to be long term, because obviously, the supplier statement process we are implementing is an ongoing business process, and they needed to be like-minded and build on an ongoing working relationship. So we wanted a solution that we would take, and then we could say, right, well, can we look at this? Can we improve this? Can we feed into any future developments of any of the software? So they were the main objectives and the drivers of what we wanted to do. So again, all our suppliers were in scope: food, clothing and home, and GNFR. There was nothing that was out of scope. We basically have an automated daily file uploads from our SAP solution that goes into statementmatching.com. And this is basically, if anybody's using SAP, it's equivalent to your FBL1N that in effect summarises all your payment details, invoice details at vendor level. We then started to identify our top age suppliers and our key suppliers. So as a pilot, before we actually went live, we looked at some of our vendors across the 3 sectors where we had issues. So we had high volume calls, where we had invoices that kept going missing, where we had age GRs, or where we had issues with purchase orders, and we contacted those vendors and we asked them to send through statements for us to reconcile, so we could get a feel for the prize that we were in effect looking to achieve. So the approach that we took was that we identified a member of the vendor management team. So this is the team that manages the EDI invoices, they also manage the GRIR, they also manage the queries, and we identified a member of that team to be a super user. So they would take this process and they would develop it internally to make sure that we are encompassing all the M&S processes. They also developed the training material to ensure that the rest of the team were on board with the concept of statement reconciliation process, because you've got to bear in mind this is a brand new process for M&S because we didn't do statements previously. So it was really important that we got over to the team how important it was to do a statement rec and what we were trying to achieve. It was also to make sure that they understood the whole end-to-end process to ensure that we had a consistent approach. What we didn't want is somebody saying, well, I'll save mine onto a spreadsheet, I'm going to do it this way. We said we wanted one way of doing it, but what we did say was that the whole of that team can build in and they can input to that final process and how it would be, but they agreed it as a team to ensure that they were consistent, so when we operated it as on a BAU daily basis. So the benefits that we achieved, and we actually achieved these sort of like quite early on really, and that is probably because M&S historically haven't done statement recs. So I think if you're in an organisation where you do, you may not realise the benefits as quickly as we did. But we definitely got a smoothing of the GRIR release, which in SAP terminology is the MR11. Historically, M&S have just done a GRIR release at 180 days. And then what would happen is we would then get an invoice after that, and then we'd have to reverse it all. It also gave us a robust audit trail supported by the reconciliations and this MR release process. So this was really invaluable at our recent financial year end. We were able just to provide all the data to the auditors that supported the releases, rather than our external auditors going in and looking at, questioning why we made releases and when we made the releases. It was all supported by the recs. It also meant that our external auditors didn't actually have to go in and identify suppliers for us to reconcile, because we'd actually done all the key suppliers. So to date, which I think this data is actually as at the end of November, we've released 4.7 million of GRIRs to P&L, and we've also reconciled over 300 supplier statement recs. Now that reconciliation of the 300 plus is not a one-off, because the way that the process works that we've implemented, it's an ongoing process. So for example, if we do a supplier reconciliation and we identify that we've got 100 invoices that are missing, that reconciliation automatically gets sent to the vendor. The vendor then just downloads and puts the invoices into the portal, and it'll also automatically then do a re-reconciliation. So it is an ongoing process. We've drastically reduced the volume of aged invoices, and I think now because the vendors know that we are doing regular statement recs, we've virtually eradicated that, and we've actually introduced the statements as we've just reviewed our terms of trading with our food and our clothing and home vendors, and that is one of the conditions of trading now, that if we request, or a vendor should send in a statement at least once a month for it to be reconciled. And we've also identified supplier invoicing issues, and we've been able to support them. So one of the examples here was one of our wine suppliers, and they were just struggling getting the invoices into M&S due to the configuration of their system not compatible, and we were able to support them, give them the resolution, and I think it was going back something about 18 months. We had some quite aged invoices for wine. So where we are now and our next step, so as part of the solution for statement matching, you also get a portal. so we have access to this supplier portal. We didn't switch the portal on straight away because we didn't feel as though we were in that position at the time for the statements. We wanted to prove the concept of statement matching, and then when we implemented our OCR solution, which was the beginning of October, that is when we switched the supplier portal on, and initially that was for our GNFR vendors. So basically the portal that we have now for GNFR vendors, they're able to view the status of their invoices, including any invoices that have been rejected. They can also view the due date of any approved invoices, and they're able to drop in statements to support that continual reconciliation process. So the GNFR was really a pilot for us. Again, it was offered to all the GNFR vendors at the same time, so we didn't go through we'll do the first 20, we'll do the next 40. It was all the GNFR vendors we were communicated to, and they were all invited to register for the portal. So far to date, we've had excellent feedback. So that's when we're now looking to roll out the portal, of which we've just started to do it in December. We're rolling out that portal to our food vendors, and bearing in mind that the food vendors, it's the highest volume of our invoices, even though the clothing and home will probably be the highest value. So when we go through and we identify what recs we're going to do, or which recs we really want to focus on, we do that through 3 separate routes. We have a monthly Procure to Pay operational review, and we'll go through our KPIs. We'll go through, what's the driver of the KPIs, and a couple of vendors may come up through that. We also have detailed monthly balance sheet reviews, and these are for food, and then we have a separate one with clothing and home, and this is with the finance people in both respective areas. And we'll get into the detail of the aging of the GRIR, anything initiatives that we're doing with new suppliers. So, for example, what we looked at here back in November is we knew that sort of during November, December, it's a peak time for our meat suppliers. So what we did to make sure that we were on the front foot, we reconciled all our meat supplier accounts. So we knew at the beginning of peak we were completely up to date, and we resolved any issues we had prior to going into our peak period. We also have a weekly Procure to Pay GRIR review, and this is across the board. So we get into specific departments here, and this is where we look at the aging of GR&I, IRGR and GRIR, and we'll identify vendors that we think things don't look quite right, or where we've got somebody in the business who is a little bit concerned. So out of those 3 areas, that's where we start to reconcile our accounts. The aim is that all members of the Procure to Pay team will reconcile statements in a consistent way. At the moment, it's just down to the vendor management team, but we do plan to roll that out right the way across the team, and that will in effect be, we'll set the bar at, to work in the Procure to Pay team within M&S, you have to be able to reconcile a vendor statement, which probably sounds quite simple to, maybe other organisations, but it is a big step for M&S.
Okay, thanks very much, Sarah. That's fantastic. I'm sure everybody's got some really useful information from you there. If I can hand over now to Dan Kimpton from statementmatching.com, and he's going to just explain some of the ways that his solution has been able to help M&S through their process. Over to you, Dan.
Okay, yeah, hi there everyone. So my name's Daniel Kimpton and I work for Statement Matching, and what I thought I'd do was just show you what the system looks like. So I've got some screenshots and I'm going to kind of walk through the key features and show you what it does. Yeah, so it's a cloud-based system. So M&S users access it via a browser, and then when you actually land in the system, you get to a dashboard, and I'll explain what you can see on the dashboard. So you can see I've got some kind of key reports in the middle section, and then on the right-hand side, which I'll just zoom in on, when the statements go into the system, it reconciles the statements against your ERP data, and it gives each statement a status, and I'll explain what they are. So that on the top where it says fully matched, so that means that all of the documents on the statement are on your ERP system, and then you've got no unpaid invoices on the vendor's account, that are not on the statement. So when Sarah's talking about doing GRIR clearing, if you've got a fully matched statement, that means that you've got everything and there's no outstanding invoices for that vendor. So in theory, if you've got any goods receipts that have not been invoiced and they've got a posting date prior to the statement date, then they're the candidates for you to then clear them down. So that's what people use the fully matched status for. But effectively, there's no exceptions from a reconciliation perspective. And then moving down, the second one, fully matched with data mismatches. So that means that you've got all the documents, but actually there's some differences. So if you look below where it says statement lines, you can see I've got some where the invoice dates are different. I've got debits and credits the wrong way round. I've got currency errors and then amount errors. So these could be issues when you've input the invoice, a user's made a mistake, or it could be an issue with the vendor's invoice. But if you identify it on a timely basis, go and fix them, and then that links back into improving your payment performance because you're resolving issues on a timely basis. And then the next two, so the third one down, unpaid items missing from statement. That means that you've got invoices on the ledger that are not on the statement. So if they're open on your system, but they're not on the supplier's statement, then it could be posted to the wrong vendor's account, or it could be a duplicate. Again, that's where you might spot your duplicates. And then lastly, the one at the bottom, this is really the key one. So incomplete matching, that means that you've got documents on the statement, that are not in your ERP system. So this is where your missing invoices and your missing credits are. So what I'll do is I'll show you a couple of examples so that you can see what the details look like. So on the dashboard, I've got some key reports. So you notice the first one that people like to look at is missing credits. So if I run the missing credits report, it's going to give me a list of statements where I've got missing credits. You'll notice it puts the highest value one at the top of the list. And then from this screen, you can actually drill into a statement and then look at the detail. So it's really simple. You can see I've got the statement data on the left and then the invoice data on the right. Everything on the statement is matched, but you've got the first line on the statement is a credit and it's missing. So what you would typically do in a process here is you can either email the vendor from my system, or you can download the report and send it from your own email system. It's up to you, but basically the vendor gets an email with a PDF attached, and this is what the vendor sees. So if this was on the M&S system, you'd see the M&S logo in the top left, and you can see where I've got the missing credit, we can default some text onto the report. So you can see that we're saying to the vendor we need a copy. And then the other cool thing is I know the status of the documents on your ERP system, so you can give the supplier the status of each line on the statement. You can also give them due dates for payment, and you can see I've got one that's paid, so I've got a payment reference as well. So this is really, really useful information for the supplier because this is typically what they'd be ringing you up for in Accounts Payable. And then back on the system, what we tell people to do in the training is actually add notes in the system when you do something. So I've just put an action on a vendor to request a credit, so you can add notes in the system. Now, the next month, if you get a statement from this supplier and this credit is still on the statement, you'll have to see that you've added notes previously that you've requested the credit. So if they've not complied, then you might want to take it next time. So it kind of builds up an audit trail in the system, which is really useful. Now, I ran a report to select my statements in that scenario, but in the shared service centre, typically people are organised by company code, like legal entity, or it might be based on suppliers. So if I might be responsible for suppliers, based on the alphabet, for example, so they would use this selection screen to kind of select their statements. You can choose which statuses that you want to select. And then you can also save your search because you're probably, selecting the same statements all the time. But if you run it, it gives you a list of statements. Once you're on this screen, you can kind of sort them by statement total, you know, if you want to work on the big ones, or you can sort them by statement date, and any of these columns can be reordered. And then if I select one from the list, I've got one at the bottom which is fully matched with data mismatches. So it takes you back to this screen. You know, there's lots of green ticks on the front page, but this is quite a big statement. So you would put a filter on it to basically show the errors, you know, because we know there's some errors in there somewhere. And then you can see, you know, if you look closely on the first line, I've got an invoice on the statement for 105.78, and then if you look at what it's been matched to, it's been matched to a document where it's been put on with an extra 1 on the invoice amount. So it's probably a keying error or an OCR error. And then the second one down, you know, that's a credit note on the statement, and it's actually on your system as an invoice. So that's a really big error that you want to spot and fix. And then you can see where I've got the dates wrong and the amounts are incorrect. And what would happen on your system, you would fix these on your ERP system, and then because we get a daily file from our customers of all the updates, when we get if you correct them in your ERP system, the file's going to come into here, and then this statement would get re-reconciled, and all of these lines will turn matched if you fix them. So that's the idea of it. It continually reconciles the statements based on the data that comes in. And then the last example I was going to show was where you've got documents on your system, you know, which are not on the statement. So it's the one at the top. So it takes you back into this screen, and you can see everything on the statement is matched, which is great. But we've got a section at the bottom called Unmatched ERP Invoices. And if you look at the entry, I've got an invoice for this vendor for 286.80. It's unpaid, dated the 25th of Feb 15. And then if you look up on the statement, you know, all of the invoices on the statement are actually between the 6th of March and the 25th of April. So it looks like it's a regular amount from this supplier. You know, you can see I've got one for the same amount in March and another one for the same amount in April. So it's probably a duplicate of the Feb invoice. But, you know, I've spotted it, so I can actually go and reverse it. Now, we've got lots of reports on the system. You know, if you've got a critical list of suppliers that you want to reconcile, for example, you can flag them up, and then you can run a critical supplier report to make sure that you've reconciled them all this period. You can also select your statements based on the type of error. You know, so if you want to prioritize missing credits, you can go and look at the missing credits report and then kind of work through them based on your own priority sequence. I'm not going to look at any of the reports because I just wanted to show you what it looked like from a vendor's perspective quickly. So if I'm an M&S vendor, which obviously I am because they use statement matching, they would invite me to the portal. I would get an email, and this is the landing page that I would hit. And you can see I've got a menu on the left. I've got a tab called My Invoices. So if I want to go and look at all my invoices on the M&S system, it lists them all out, and I can see the status of it. I can see the due date for payment, and you can see I've got one there that's paid. And you can actually search for specific invoice numbers or payments if you wish, and you can also submit messages on this page as well, which, you know, M&S would then get a query, you know, if something's past due or something like that, for example. Now, if I want to go and look at my payments, I can also look at payments. So there's a separate tab, and then if you click on a payment, it'll actually show me the invoices that are in that payment, you know, which from an AR perspective on the vendor side is really, really useful. And the whole idea of it is to reduce, you know, the supplier queries, you know, if they've got access to this. And it's really simple to use. So the third part, you know, this is great if you can get suppliers to do this. You can actually give suppliers the option of uploading their own statement. Now, they can email statements in, they can email PDFs, I mean, they can even send paper if you want, and that they can get into statement matching anyway. But ideally, you know, it'd be great if suppliers upload their own Excel. And all they have to do is they upload the Excel, and then it just basically puts the column headings in the Excel on the right-hand side, and then you have to map them into the system. So you can see I've mapped invoice number on the Excel to document number, and then I've got the amount, the invoice date, and the currency. And then once you import it, the vendor can go and look at the reconciliation results immediately. So you can see I've got some missing documents on here, I've got a currency problem, and then of course M&S can see the same results on their side. So it's great, and then they can identify, you know, effectively make sure that M&S have got all their documents so that the whole process goes smoothly. Now, I'll just finish on one point that Sarah picked up on her presentation as well. We do a proof of concept with all potential customers. You can do it for up to 10 vendors, where you can download data into Excel. Anyone in AP can do this. You don't need IT support. So you can download the data into Excel. You can give us the statements. We'll build the system. We'll set up a training session, which takes about an hour, which we do via WebEx. And then that's the day that the 4-week POC starts. So you can actually see the solution working with your own data. And if you're interested in the portal, you can even invite some of the suppliers to participate in the POC and give you feedback on the portal if you wish. So that's available to everyone. And pricing, you know, we can follow up afterwards about pricing, but it's basically a subscription. There's no upfront costs or setup costs. It's just a monthly cost based on the annual volume of invoices you process. And then there's a variable charge, which is based on the number of statements that you upload. And it's a 30-day rolling contract, no minimum term. And that's it for me. I'm conscious of the time, so I'm going to hand back to Ellen to take any questions. So, yeah, thanks for your time.
That's great. Thanks very much, Daniel, and to you, Sarah, as well, for a fantastic webinar. Some very useful information, I'm sure, for everybody there. We have had a couple of questions, and I think if I can direct the first one across to you, Sarah. Somebody's just asking, how long was the change management process before the big bang? And I guess they're referring to the implementation that you made there.
Well, I think as Dan said, what we did a proof of concept. So we were actually implemented within a couple of months. The longest period of time was actually working with our IT to get our downloaded data. But what we actually manually downloaded FBL1N until we got that automated. So it is a relatively quick process. And because the change management was in Procure-to-Pay and within our control, it was actually, made it a lot simpler.
Okay, all right, thank you. And another question, which I think, Dan, you might be able to answer. It's how do you get the statements into the system?
Okay, yeah, so there's a couple of options. I finished on the portal, so if you're using the portal, the vendor can upload it themselves if it's Excel, or they can submit PDF email attachments to a default email address. So that's one method. But without the portal, basically, in Accounts Payable, M&S can actually import their own statements that they receive in Excel format. So if it's Excel, the customer imports them. Now, if it's a PDF email attachment, you would forward them to an email address that we provide, and we extract the data from the PDF as part of a service, and then we put it on statement matching within 24 hours. And it's the same with paper. You know, you would scan paper statements to the same email address, and then we extract the data and get it onto the system for you. So it's kind of a managed service for paper and PDF, and then Excel you can import directly into the system.
Okay, thank you. And another question for you, Sarah. Does M&S use PO for all purchases? So do you have a PO for all your purchases?
Yeah, we operate a no purchase order, no pay, and that is across all the sectors: food, clothing and home, and GNFR.
Okay, all right, thank you. And another question: can statement matching review PO numbers as well as invoice numbers?
I'll take that one if you like, Sarah. Yeah. So, but within statement matching, obviously on a supplier statement, you typically have the the invoice header information, which by and large doesn't include the purchase order. But we do have some customers who are getting suppliers to put the purchase order number on the statement, and then they want to then use that to compare against the purchase order that they've got on their ERP system. So on statement matching, on the import, we've got 5 customer fields, and you can use those customer fields to bring in whatever data that you like. And obviously one of those data fields could be purchase order number. And then that purchase order number would then appear in a column on the reconciliation screen that I showed when I was going through the screenshots. So yes, you can bring purchase order numbers and other data to suit your process.
Okay, thanks very much. And we have also had a few questions in reference to the slides. Yes, they will be available afterwards. And should anyone have any further questions, we have had a couple of other questions as well, and we can get those answers back to you, but I'm just conscious of the time now. So as I said, those slides that you've been asking for today's session will be available afterwards, and we'll get those sent out to you together with the recording as well. And if you do have any questions on the back of those once you receive them, then of course just email them across to me, and I can either ask Sarah or Danny from Statement Matching to get those answers back to you. But in the meantime, if I could just ask you to please look out for the next and final webinar that we have of the year on the 18th of December. I hope you'll join us for that one. But for now, thanks again to Sarah Cliffe from M&S, and to Daniel Kimpton from statementmatching.com, and to you all for joining us this morning. I hope you've enjoyed it. And thank you, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.